Yes, yes, y'all. And you don't stop. That's right. Today is the day Which Way to Wisdom is live. I am very excited about the new course that I have created here. It's about approaching spirituality in a post religious framework. The religions of the world are not, the traditional religions of the world are not up to the task of moving us into the kind of world that we would like to build, but they have good things that are there for us. There are gems still in that path. So what can we do to assemble a new way forward? I have created a course on this. It's called Which Way to Wisdom. I am very excited about it. I think that it is going to open some new doors for us, and I can't wait to hear what you all think about it. It is less than lunch is in a lot of places. If you go out for lunch or if you order lunch in or something like that, you probably are going to pay more for that. It's about the cost of a philosophy book. So check it out. And if you really like what I do here and you want to learn some astrology, then I have bundled it into Astrology from the Ground Up also. So for the same price as Astrology from the Ground Up has always been, you can learn the fundamentals of astrology. And so there's a big portion of Which Way to Wisdom that's like, hey, we should learn some divination. Here's how we're going to think with information. And astrology gives you a whole bunch of information, gives you an opportunity to learn things at a rate that is better than chance. So if you want to learn how to do that, then the course Which Way to Wisdom is bundled in there for the same price. Didn't change the price on that at all. So it is all available now. And let me know in the comment section what you think about it. The first module is live now. And so that's out here for free on the podcast. It's going to be available on YouTube and all that. So let me know what you think. Let me know where you think I'm wilding, because I'm out here just making this up right now. So check it out and let me know what y'all think. I can't wait to hear it. And thank you so much for checking out ZamboniFunk.com. Peace and blessings, family.
What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni, and this is going to be the first installment in a course that is an introduction to post-religion spirituality. We are in an interesting moment in time which calls for a kind of spirituality that is new and different from everything that we have experienced before. And so I thank you so much for being here with me. Quickly, I just want to say that I am not positioning myself as some kind of messiah or some kind of figure who knows better than anyone else or an authority figure of any sort. I don't want you to follow me. I don't want this is not evangelism of any sort. I don't think that I have figured out the truth or the secret, and that you need to do that in order to be morally right with God or something like this. Like that, I have no interest in creating a cult around myself. That's not what I'm doing here at all. In fact, I wasn't even planning on doing this, but several people have asked me for it. I understand that I sometimes come off as like a bit of a wise man figure or something like this. I think that if you knew me for real, you would not think I'm as wise as all that. But I understand that I say poetic things and I look into the future on a regular basis, and my predictions come out pretty good sometimes. And so as a result of that, it comes off and I also deeply engage in spirituality in my like real life. I actually pray on a regular basis, and I actually have a practice of, I have an ancestor practice, and I've got stuff that I do that does keep me rooted and connected to whatever might be beyond. And because I actually do have that kind of experience and that kind of practice that I actually do in my regular life, people see me praying over my meals and this kind of thing. People sometimes ask me about a way to get in from where we are now. And so I'm doing this as a just So not because I want to tell everybody what I'm doing or because I want to be considered some kind of authority figure around what spirituality is or anything like that. I'm not or moral superiority of any sort, nothing like this. If you've listened to my podcast and you've heard me say that I consider myself a villain a lot of times, I'm deeply suspicious of moral superiority from any quarter, include most especially from me. I know myself well enough to know that I am not morally superior to anyone else. And so I'm not trying to create a cult around myself here. I am simply responding to this question that I get a lot of times from people who don't necessarily have a spiritual practice and who want to move toward a spiritual practice that is resonant and grounded in a way that they feel from me. People compliment my vibe a lot, and people, I think, want to move toward the kind of vibe that I have. And so that is the basis of what I'm going to be talking about here. And so yeah, hopefully it's clear that I'm not trying to evangelize. I'm not trying to tell anybody what's right or correct. I am always looking for ways in. And if you have some like a better idea than I have, then first I want to hear about it because I am interested in what is true more than interested in being right. And second, you can do whatever feels good to you. You don't have to do what I think is real. You need to do what you think is real and keep me out of it for the most part.
What up? It's Zamboni from the future. I was going back over this and like putting the finishing touches on the course before publication, and I wanted to go a little bit deeper on this introduction here. Because I want you to know where it came from. I want you to know how I got to this place. So one thing that I have found very interesting is that multiple people in multiple instances who do not know each other have told me that I should lead a cult. So that is a funny thing to think with. And, you know, like I kind of brushed it off for a long time, but it got me to thinking about what this might mean. And so it's good to remember that every religion is simply a cult that has stood the test of time. So, you know, it's good to remember sometimes that like Christianity started as a necromantic death cult of people, a group of weirdos who had to be forcibly removed from graveyards because their most famous or their like most important god form was a dead guy, who rose from the dead. So they hung out in graveyards a lot and had to be shooed out of them shits, right? So, but then the religion the cult stood the test of time, and so it became a religion. And so all religious traditions are this way. They start out as a cult and then turn into a religion. And so what I'm proposing here is in fact a new approach to religion. And so it's going to be kind of cult-like in that way. Now, I don't really want to be the cult of personality. I don't want to be somebody who is, pedestalized or anything like that, but I am here to teach and I am here to learn. And so even though I'm not gonna do any of the sign up with me and then we drink the Kool-Aid together or anything like that, I'm not interested in any of that sort of stuff. I am in this position where people keep asking me. It's crazy how people keep wanting this from me. People who don't know, one of the people who said this to me was, I work at a restaurant, and one of the tables that I served put that on the receipt. It was like, you should lead a cult on the receipt. That they are like, okay, thank you. I served your sushi. Okay, cool. But this is a thing that has come up a lot of times. I also tend the bar there at that restaurant, and one time after I had just started my shift, and so the bartender from the shift beforehand, he was sitting around the other side of the bar, and he was just drinking, hanging out, and so he's like, maybe 4 whiskeys deep or something like this, and he's feeling feelings, you know what I mean? Had a rough home life, and he's like feeling feelings through all that, and he noticed that I pray over my meals, and he saw that there was something different about me, and he was like, yo, can you teach me how to be whatever that is? And the short answer to that question was no. I can't, now's not the moment for this. But I took that to heart, and I was like, okay, so I do have something that is maybe worthwhile to teach here. And, it's because we are in this moment, and I'm going to talk about this throughout the lecture that's upcoming here, but we're in a moment where the traditional religions don't make sense for the world that we actually live in anymore. And so we have to do something else rather than simply sticking to religious traditions that were created in a moment when there were no computers around, there were no calculators around. Like, the best thing you could do was an abacus or something like that. Like, it's a different game. The social media has changed the game, you know what I mean? And we live in this globalized environment where we have to make a new thing in order to survive in the world where we're going. And so Octavia Butler is one of my favorite authors, and I don't read her work so much anymore. I used to be really about it, but I found that it's so horrifying so much of the time that it just it was fucking my dreams up, and it was it just kind of made me more fearful. It's very prescient work, and it's also very compelling literature. I love Octavia Butler as an author, but I don't spend as much time reading her as would be due to one of my favorites, the way that I read the hell out of Ursula Le Guin. It's my goal to read basically everything she's ever written. It's not that way for me with Octavia Butler, but Octavia Butler is super dope, and she wrote a 3-part series called Lilith's Brood, and in the second book in that series, so the first book is called Dawn. In it sort of details this idea that humans have brought the Earth to a catastrophic condition. It's about to be mutually assured destruction. It's happening, and then some aliens come and they stop the thing from happening. And but what that means is that they have to destroy everything basically, and they gather a bunch of humans and they sort of put them into comas, and then the goal of what they're going to do is, their job as aliens is to go to planets and find species that they can mate with and create a new thing, a new hybrid alien and native to the planet species that then goes on to be a different kind of thing, and then we'll go on and repeat this process, right? So in the first book, Lilith is the main character, and she's the one who has to, she's the first one that they wake up and they tell the story to, and she goes through a whole thing, and then she has to wake up the rest of the team and get the rest of the team on board so that they can all mate with the aliens, right? And there's a lot of heartache and turmoil that goes through that, and that's what the thrust of the book, right? And so then in the second book, she has become a mother, and so she has gone through with this process of mating with the aliens and all that, and so they've begun the process, and this book centers on the first male of the new ones born to a human woman. And so he's this new character, he's this new breed, this new thing that the world has never seen before. And he gets kidnapped and has to spend a long time away from his family, and his family has the power, the knowledge, and the power to go and rescue him. And they choose not to, because he needs to learn from the hardship that's out there in the world. and that's going to be a part of his journey. And then he comes back and he's got all this different these different ideas about what the mixture can and must be, and how to sort of like create this new thing to go out into the world and begin the evolutionary process of being in the world as a new species. And that book was published in the same year that I was born, and it is so resonant to me. I very much identify with this character of like the one who is the mixed breed, who has to live in the world in a different way than in an unprecedented way, we could say, and has to assemble a life, a way of being from the available component parts. And so it's not that his way of being in the world is entirely new. It is rooted in human traditions and the alien traditions, but it is also necessarily a new kind of thing. This is very much the way that I have been in my life. I'm going to tell a long story about my history and that kind of thing, but like it's a similar situation where I was sort of disowned by a lot of the sort of ancestral traditions that I should have been privy to or had access to, and that because of that, I have had to assemble a different kind of spirituality. And it so happens that we are in a moment where we need a new kind of spirituality. And so the thing that I have assembled is here, and it's new, and it seems like the thing that is opportune for this moment. Part of the reason why I created this thing in the first place is because I came up in a religious tradition that told me that astrology wasn't going to be real, wasn't going to work. And then as I started to study astrology and become an astrologer, I found out that it was real. It was working. I was doing better than chance by using astrology. And so I had to expand my idea of what constitutes the world, what the world is made of, in order to make room for this new data that I had coming in. So if astrology is real, then what? What does that mean about the nature of the world? And last year and a half ago, I taught an astrology course called Astrology from the Ground Up. And the most difficult part of that was the introduction, because in the introduction, I had to figure out how to say what astrology is. And so the concept that I came up with, I did a reasonable introduction, and I think you should take that course because I stand behind it. But the introduction to that course ultimately turned into this whole course, like the idea of what is the world made of and how does it operate. So I include astrology in that because astrology is working, but there are many streams of tradition that come together to turn into this one. And so with that in mind, it's important to remember that I don't, none of the traditions that I come from would recognize me, would recognize themselves in me. So I've spent a bunch of time in New York hanging out with Jamaicans and playing reggae music. And so I have a relationship to Rastafari. I have a relationship to Taoism. I have a relationship to black churches. I have a relationship to indigenous Native American old religion. I have a relationship to many different, astrology is another good one. Astrology, I don't have any certifications in astrology. I'm just some dude on the internet, So I am not certified in any of this. I'm not the Taoists would not think that I'm a real Taoist. Indians don't think that I'm a real Indian. Black people, black people do recognize me, but but I'm definitely a different kind of black dude than, when Black Panther came out, there was a lot of flexing about how black people were. And I'm kinda, I'm pretty black. I'm black relative to white people. And the white people in my family don't really consider me one of them either. And so because I am not any of those things, if you want to learn Taoism, go learn from a real Taoist. if you want to learn about like the Native American spirituality and stuff like that, they have churches for that. You can go to North Dakota and learn from people who are legit in that tradition. There are real Rastaman the Nyabingi, who live in the hills in Jamaica and all that. Like, you can go and learn these traditions. What I'm doing is not traditional. What I'm doing is a new thing. And so, as such, you should not take my word for it. You should just feel the vibe, see what works for you. Also, some of what I'm gonna say here is gonna be potentially triggering. Some of it might cause some psychic discomfort for you. In the event that that's happening, go find somebody in a lab coat to help you. This is an entertainment product. I am here. When I want to have fun, I like to exchange ideas with other people. That is how I entertain myself. That is how I have fun. Maybe that's how you have fun also, and I would expect that because you're here in the first place. So that's what we're doing here. We're having fun. We are entertaining ourselves. None of this is anything like gospel. Like I said, this hasn't stood the test of time. This is brand new. This is a year old. Christianity is one of the new religions, and it's fucking 2,000 years old. Like, okay, you with it? So, the other thing is that I'm going to recommend some breath work. Be sure that you are seated in a way or lying down in a way that sometimes when people do this kind of breath work, then they will pass out. Usually passing out is like one of the main ones. Sometimes you can have like heart stuff can come up and this kind of thing too. If you feel any of that happening, desist immediately. Don't hurt yourself with it. You'll want to sit or lie down in a way where if you do pass out, then you won't be at risk of don't be sitting upright in a chair so that like if you pass out then there's a fall that could injure you or something like that. Like, do it in a place where there's soft things around, and I just like to lie down in the first place. Like, I'm just lying on the floor, and so if something does happen, then there's nowhere for me to fall to. I'm already in the bottom spot in my house, so don't hurt yourself with any of this. Some of this might, there's going to be some ancestor stuff. I definitely do recommend speaking with the earlier ancestors rather than the ones who are close by, because the ones who are close by are more likely to be on their journey toward wellness and maybe not well yet. We all come from indigenous and well ancestors, people who had a clear idea of what a reasonable spirituality that considers relationships and relationality with the whole greater earth cosmos, earth organism. We all have ancestors who are more in that stream. If you go back far enough, they're there. And so that's one of the reasons why I recommend dealing with those folks instead of like the ones who are, like your grandma or something. Like if you have a dead grandma, then she can be great and she can be someone who you really love and resonate with or something like that. But there's a good chance that she is downstream from, she's already downstream from the break that is causing a lot of the problems that we're living in right now. And so that can cause, and a lot of times there'll be people who are caught up in wild bullshit. And so it can be triggering to deal with those folks. It can cause problems, it can cause harm. And so again, if you feel any of this coming open for you, there are people who do ancestor work for real. I think my friend Paulus Augustine is at the last time we talked, which was a couple of years ago, she was going through the training for doing real ancestor work. There's a whole bunch of people around. I would recommend looking out for Daniel Four, and she was one of his students. But there's a crew of people who do that kind of thing. I also, while we're on the subject, I have done a lot of drugs. Most of them have been psychedelic, and a lot of what I have come to is downstream from taking a lot of psychedelic drugs. And so take all this shit with a grain of salt. I might not know what I'm talking about. There's a great chance that I don't know what I'm talking about. Now, I'm going to go through a whole course here, and I'm going to justify everything that I'm saying with examples. And so I think that I'm on to something, but like I said, if you need somebody in a lab coat to help you navigate your trauma and difficulty, I'm so here for that. And I'm not recommending anything that your doctor doesn't recommend, okay? Let's just be clear about that. So if you are still here, you're still down for it, you're still down for me to be as weird and brand new as I have described here, then you're in the right place, and I think we're gonna have fun. Thanks for being here.
So with that in mind here, let's go ahead and see what's happening. Let's get it started here. So what we're really doing here in this post-religion spirituality is we are going to create harmony. Harmony is the centerpiece here, and it's the thing that we are going to move toward trying to achieve. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's think about it. So, but in order to do that, we need to sort of take it back for a while. We need to understand the moment that we're in. So it is worth recognizing that spirituality exists outside of humans, and it likely predates humanity. Humanity is only like the less than a blink of an eye in geological time. You know, the Earth has been here for a really long time, and there have been, you know, many species, many ways of being in the world, many bodies, many spirits, many entities in the world from much longer than humans have been here. And so this is not, so the idea of spirituality is not specific to humanity. And this is even noticeable now, like elephants can be seen like holding funerals for their loved deceased, and there's a kind of spiritual component to that. We can see that that insects, bees and cicadas have a kind of way of interacting with each other that exists in a space that is that communicates beyond what we are immediately able to grasp as humans in our perceptive modes, the sensory information that we can take in. They've got something going on that is deeper and more profound than whatever we can notice, and so we can sort of just notice that is happening. There are, though I often think about the birds, songbirds especially, and how they have a kind of religious devotion to the sunrise that speaks to a way of being in the world that cares deeply about what happens in real space, and real space being like understood as things that are perhaps beyond the physical in some kind of way. I think that based on my experience with songbirds, which is not as much as some others might have, but my experience with songbirds leads me to believe that they consider their morning ritual an integral part of the sunrise. That is to say that they sing the sun up. So the sun comes up in part because the birds sing their song to and for the sun. And so there's a kind of religious devotion to that is simply observable. So it's a thing that exists in the world, right? So then humans come onto the scene in the world. You know, there's argument as to how long ago that was, but we could go maybe 100, 200,000 years ago or something like this. And humans show up on the scene. And the evolutionary niche of the human is culture. So that is to say that humans are great generalists, and that we, the reason why we have a space, like an evolutionary niche is going to be like there is a space in the environment where there are resources to be had if you can get to them, right? And so this is the idea of like there is an advantage to being able to fly. And so various creatures have developed flight throughout time because there's an advantage to that. There's a way that you can shape yourself in order to exploit that advantage in an evolutionary way. For humans, the way that we have made for ourselves is by being great generalists, by not being specialized in the way that a cheetah is specialized at running real fast. A cheetah is very good at sprinting. That is the primary way that cheetahs get down in the world, is they know how to sprint, and that's how they get their prey, right? The way that humans go about doing things is not by being great at one thing, but rather being good at learning and doing things based and responding to the environment. So as environments change fairly quickly, then humans are really good at learning the new thing and then doing that thing. The way that we do this is by not, so the way that we do this is by we've got really long childhoods, like infancy and childhood lasts a really long time. And because of that, there is a long period of time where the human brain and body is extremely plastic and can learn a lot about environmental things as we experience the environment. So it's possible for humans to learn to live in the desert, and it's possible for humans to learn to live in the tundra, and it's possible for humans to learn to live in the rainforest, and it's possible for humans to live on islands, and it's possible for humans to live in places that are landlocked. It's possible for humans to live in myriad conditions so long as they were either born in or raised in, most importantly, raised in the environment where that matters, or where they will come to be, and that they are taught the culture and the customs of that place in that environment. So if there are people who can live there, then their people know the ways to live in that space, in the desert or whatever climate they're in, or whatever conditions or circumstances they're in. And because humans have such a long period of plasticity, then they can learn any language, they can learn any way of being in the world by simply being taught that. This is distinct from, say, migratory birds, for example. Migratory birds who don't overlap generations, or not just birds, more migratory animals in general, who don't overlap generations. And so they aren't being taught how to get from here to there by parents, but rather it's ingrained, it's innate, and they just follow this route. They are less plastic and therefore more rigid in the way that they get from here to there. Humans, because we are more plastic for a longer period of time, can learn new things more quickly. So in the case of the migratory birds, then they will require genetic evolution in order to get to develop new ways of exploiting their evolutionary niche. Whereas humans can learn something in the space of a generation, in the space of one generation, which is not enough time for genetic mutation to take hold on the evolutionary landscape. Rather, we do it at the software level, right? We do it in the space of understanding and applying understanding to whatever situation or circumstance is going on. So because of that long plasticity, we can learn any environment, and in an ability to learn any environment, then we can do in many different things in the world. And so we don't specialize, we are great generalists because we learn extremely quickly. The way that we go about learning is passed on through cultural traditions and customs. That's the primary thing that we've got going on here. Humans become the dominant species that we are because if we think that humans are the dominant species, which, like, you know, follow your heart about that. If you want to make a case that bacteria are stronger than humans, like, fucking do it. But humans become as strong as we are by way of culture and cultural tradition and custom, right? So religion and spirituality is an integral part of the way that cultural traditions are passed on. Cultural traditions on the evolutionary time scale are innate. They are inherent. There is no separating cultural traditions and customs from religion, because religion provides a basis for understanding who we are and our relationship to the world in general. So who we are and how we relate to the world is the way that we also interact with, like, spirit or matter. There's a sort of understanding of how to navigate those things, and that is innate. That's not going to be considered something separate until a very recent moment in history. It's all going to be culture and tradition and religion and convention. All of that is wrapped up into one piece that is a kind of unit unto itself. And so religion evolves as part of the mechanism for being in the world. So spirituality exists outside of humanity. But then once humans show up onto the scene and bring culture and tradition and customs to the table as the evolutionary niche, then religion, which packages spirituality into culture and customs, becomes the primary mode for understanding who we are in the world and how to relate to the world. And so it's all the culture, tradition, customs, religion, it's all the one piece. Religion provides a basis for cultural customs and productions that stands the test of time. This is important. So all of this stuff evolves because it stands the test of time, right? And so we survive a selective environment, which is to say that natural selection is taking place, and we survive that environment by producing culture that is time tested. The stuff that survives across time is the stuff that makes it into religions, cultures, and customs as we understand them, even now. However, once we get to the more recent era of history, you know, thinking post-Enlightenment and this kind of thing, post-Industrial Revolution and such, then we witness the death of God, or the death of religion as we once understood it. So we get into separation of church and state matters a lot. You know, we're in post-Enlightenment thinking and into liberalism, and, you know, the sort of like in the classical sense of liberalism, like meaning not the monarchy, right? So up to this point in history, the monarch or the leader of the state has been understood to be imbued by the power of God, divinely ordained in some kind of way. You know, throughout much of history, the emperor is a god form, or at very least, then the Pope is an important political figure and not just a religious figure, right? Not just someone who is preaching about morality and the state of what the world is and how to relate to ourselves and to the world at large. Not simply on the spiritual basis, but also on a political basis as well. So you always get a closeness between the king and the Pope, or the religious leader of some sort, or sometimes they are the very same figure, but there's always a kind of connection throughout all of human history until we get to about the Enlightenment or so. That is when liberalism, the idea of like being free in our own selves, like individuals can be free, and as such, then they can go out and do things like make their own decisions in the world that are not beholden to what the king says or what the pope says or what the religious leader has said in some kind of way. So that becomes an important cultural revolution that changes the way that we go about thinking about religion in general. At this time, atheism becomes an option at all. Before that point, it's not really understood that that could even be a thing. Like atheism doesn't make sense because religion is so deeply entrenched in all of the cultural and traditional values that atheism doesn't really, it is an unthinkable concept. It's not even that it would be considered wrong. It's that you would never have the thought before you get to this point of the separation of church and state. And so now we've got the church doing its spiritual thing, and it is explicitly disallowed from taking part in the political and like imperial ventures of the state. So those are two separate things. And so the state and the political machine becomes explicitly atheistic. And then that makes room for atheism to become a thing in the cultural zeitgeist as well. Also, around this time, folks can notice that religion is kind of a scam. This is when we get to, Marx is talking about religion as the opiate of the masses. We've got Christian theologians who are also slaveholders, and so there's a whole question of hypocrisy in the church and this kind of thing. We get a long legacy of corruption in the church at large, in the Catholic Church and Protestant churches, in the whole thing, like this idea of like buying your way into heaven or buying your way out of hell, or like all type of uncouth behavior throughout the church, like showing up and being like a major problem all throughout the church and throughout most of time, but then really coming to notice it, especially so around that same moment in the Enlightenment, that's around the same moment that we start to get like the printing press. And so the printing press makes it possible to print a bunch of pamphlets and stuff like this. Martin Luther becomes an important figure. And so one of the things that matters so much about Martin Luther and Protestantism in general is the idea of democratizing the text. So as the printing press becomes available, then you can print more Bibles. And if you can print more Bibles, then more people can read Bibles. And so then we start to get translations. So it's not just the Bible in Latin anymore, which is a difficult language that you probably don't speak at home, but rather you can have Bibles in English or in German or French or whatever. And so because of that, then more people can read what it says for themselves. And as they read what it says for themselves, then they can go about making their own decisions about what is right and what is true and what is legal and just and whatever else, because they have the text themselves and can read the text themselves, rather than only the priest has the text and can read it in Latin. And so then the priest is like, I got it, I'll just tell you what it says. And so there's a bottleneck there that gives the priest all of this power. So as we see this democratization of the text, then there is more room for people to be like, hold up, these priests are on some bullshit. And so there's a kind of like a loss of faith in the church and the whole the clergy. The whole order of the clergy becomes like less credible than it had been up to that point in all of human history, right? Meanwhile, at the same time, we get Darwin and the theory of natural selection. this theory fucks. It's really good. It goes hard in like generating an understanding of how we come to be in the world. Like it works really well. The reason why we call it a theory and not a hypothesis is because it's the only one standing right now. You never really get to the truth, and we will come to that a little later in this talk here, but you never really get to truth like we have arrived at the answer, right? The only thing that you can do is you can propose all of the hypotheses that you can propose, and then the ones that don't cut it get weeded out until you're left with the one that seems to be working better than all the rest of them. And that one is a theory and not a hypothesis anymore. So the theory of natural selection does this. It goes really hard. It weeds everything else out. So literal creationism doesn't make sense anymore. And so the idea that like there was a God creator deity who uses he, him pronouns and who like calls the firmament into land and sky, and then over a period of 7 days creates all of everything, and then it culminates in the creation of man, and then that man is then they take a rib and then create a woman from that. Like that doesn't make literal sense anymore, especially when we get to this place where it's like, okay, well, natural selection really makes all the sense here. And so now at this point in time, it's the end of 2024 when I'm recording this right now. And so the idea of literal creationism just doesn't, like, even your most staunch creationists are like have to admit that there is something to this idea of natural selection. And so like maybe it's a clockmaker or something like that, like God is the one who puts natural selection into motion or something like this. But like the idea that natural selection isn't happening at all just doesn't hold any water at this point. And so so that goes on to undermine further the credibility of the church as an institution, which is inherently conservative and trying to bottleneck the information. So as all of this is going on, then at the same time, we get economic revolution. So a different way of approaching the economy comes out of the liberalism. So let's remember that liberalism just means that not the monarchy, right? So there had been a king, and the king was an autocrat who's making all the decisions. And then everybody just kind of does what the king says to do, right? And then that gets replaced with a republic or a democracy, right? And so, and listen, I'm not trying to, I understand slaves and women can't vote and all the rest of that, right? I'm not talking about any of that right now. But the idea of liberal democracy is this idea of like, there are many decision makers, and those many decision makers can not only vote in the system, in the like political system, but more importantly, they can spend money where they spend money. And so there's the creation of an economy that outsources price controls to each individual consumer rather than letting an autocrat make all the decisions. So when there's an autocrat making decisions, then inevitably there are going to be too many economic decisions to make. And so some of them aren't going to get made and they're just going to sit there. And so stuff's going to get stale and stagnant. And some of these decisions are going to be made poorly, and you just got to deal with that shit. Meanwhile, a liberal economy, a democratic liberal economy, is going to allow for many people to make price controls. And so like, and so what I mean by price controls here is like, if you create a thing and then you try to sell that thing on the market and you price it at a certain level. Does it sell for that price or does it not sell for that price? So if it sells for that price, then you know that the thing is at least this valuable. And so maybe you think about trying to increase the price a little bit in order to increase your profits and such. And then you'll get to a certain point where it doesn't sell anymore. And so then you know now that the thing is not more valuable than this, right? Or maybe the thing didn't sell in the first place. And so the thing is not at least this valuable. And so then that tells you what is needed in the marketplace. It tells you what other people around you need and value. And it tells you how much you can sell this thing for. And because that is democratized in this way where there are many inputs into the market and lots of folks are making decisions about what things are worth and the value of the culture at large, then that outperforms the autocrat who's making all the decisions. And because it outperforms the liberal democracy, the liberal democratic economy outperforms the autocratic economy, in the sense that the liberal democratic economy gets more done more quickly and at a better rate. And so it does a better job of creating wealth and as a result creating military might and such, and so outperforms autocratic economies. So that at the same moment that the credibility of the church is tanking means that there is more incentive for people to spend their time on the economy and making things that are valuable in the marketplace rather than like finding their meaning in the church. And so I think of this as the rise of the almighty dollar. I think about so like the almighty, the sense of like being all powerful, a deity, right? But it's the dollar instead. And so this is a reference to a Lil Wayne lyric in the song I'm Millie. He says, "My seconds, minutes, hours go to the almighty dollar and the almighty power of that chopper," right? And so here there is an implicit understanding. Like, I don't think Lil Wayne has really thought about this at this level, you know what I mean? Especially in 2008 or whatever that was maybe 2006. But like the idea that all of my time is going to go toward making money, and I'm going to live and die by the sword if I need to, because the most important and most meaningful thing in my life is the almighty dollar, is an important insight that is maybe not the way that we want to live, but is true for the moment that we actually live in. But we can notice that markets do not provide meaning in the way that we might hope for. You know, the thing that is most valuable in a human life tends to be meaning. It's something that is meaningful. And so it's like this idea that like, I don't have children myself, but I hear that when you have children, then you come to this place where you would never trade what you get from your children, which is not something material, but like a feeling of something, participating in something meaningful, or the child matters more than anything else. And you can't really say what that is, but you feel it in your heart, right? That meaning is the most valuable thing. It's the most important thing. And so, and markets and the almighty dollar does not provide that kind of meaning. And so spiritual curiosity remains among those who among us, among the people who are here now, but whose elders, you know, we live in a moment where all of the elders only remember the almighty dollar. So there's no, or there's, you know, there are certain like traditions and churchical customs and these kinds of things, but even that has been so under the thumb of the almighty dollar for so long that there's no real memory of how to be in the world in a way that doesn't treat the dollar first. And so we are here in this moment, and we maintain a kind of curiosity around spirituality and around the beyond in some kind of way that doesn't, it remains, it just remains here, and we don't necessarily know how to move forward, but we do know that there's got to be a better way to do it than what we're actually doing right now. And so we are in this moment where there's this hunger, there's this thirst for some kind of spirituality. And so what we end up seeing is also we are in a global economy, right? So you can send stuff all the way across the world and back and forth and this kind of thing, right? And so part of what we get with that is that we can exchange cultural traditions and customs and religious ideas and religious texts and these kinds of things, right? There is a little bit of danger of appropriation and this kind of thing, but you know what? Like, that's part of what it is. That's part of where we're here, where we're at now in the world is like we are mixing things. And, part of the appeal of a foreign religion is that it doesn't have the kind of trauma that it doesn't carry the kind of trauma that your own home religion might, right? So if you were raised in a religion that subscribes to corrupt churches, or that had some bad priests involved, or that it was involved in slavery or other theft of resources or time or any of the rest of that stuff. Like, if you were raised in that kind of culture, then you might not be ready to go back to that because you're interested in spirituality in some kind of way. And so your spiritual curiosity might take you to a place where you're looking at other cultures and looking at what else there might be, because those other texts or those other traditions and customs don't carry the same kind of baggage for you that your own tradition has, right? And so there's a dynamic, or there's a demand for exchange, for cultural exchange in this way. We are in a moment where languages can be easily translated. And so you can get a copy of the Bhagavad Gita in English and check it out and see what is going on in there and this kind of thing. Furthermore, there are, in the 90s, in the late 80s and early 90s, there was stuff going on like Project Hindsight, for example, where they would find a bunch of ancient Hellenistic texts and have begun to translate those into English and other languages. And so the idea that there are ancient texts which are involved with mystery traditions which survive and that can be plumbed, or that can be excavated in order to get some insight, some ancient wisdom, or some ancient insight that might have some utility in the age that we're in right now. This can show up. This is true enough about like astrological texts, for example, which is what largely what Project Hindsight was, but also magic shows up in that a lot of the time. And so we get stuff like the PGM, for example, which survives. This is a magical text that is essentially a spell book on Egyptian magic from that time period, and it survives. And so how much of this can you do if you do it in English? I don't know, but maybe you should try it out. There's this kind of sense in the culture and the moment that we are in. This is also a moment of indigenous revival where we are sort of like the cultural zeitgeist is primed for looking at indigenous tradition, custom, spirituality, religion in a way that is not as derisive and dehumanizing as it was at the moment of colonialism. So there is an audience for a text like Braiding Sweetgrass, for example. Robin Wall Kimmerer is a Potawatomi author. And so she writes this book in, I think, 2011 or something like this. And it sort of like uses indigenous wisdom alongside the ideas of a science professor in upstate New York, and sort of like puts those together in a way that is widely understood to be useful and effective, even by like an NPR audience or something like this, right? Like, so there's mass appeal to indigenous revival, even though we are in a moment where we are close to the extinction of, for example, Potawatomi culture, right? Like the number of people who speak Potawatomi fluently is fewer than can have a conversation right now. And so that there's something to like the legitimate threat of death around many indigenous cultures, but there's a cultural zeitgeist which would like to revive those cultures, especially insofar as they provide wisdom that is spiritually relevant in this day and age. And so there's something here to it. So we're in this moment where even though we are evolved to be religious, to be spiritual, and we have witnessed the death of credibility of religious institutions. And we are now in a moment where we're scrounging around looking for something that we can hold on to that isn't just the market. And so that's what I'm here to talk about. That's what I'm here to sort of like give us some ways to think into a spirituality for our times. We are in this cultural moment where we are looking at tech innovation and all of the rest of it. We are in a moment of hyper novelty, right? Where we are evolved to a particular kind of environment, and the environment is changing more quickly than we are able to adapt to. And let's remember that we humans are the ones who are well adapted to a quick pace of change. But even we are not prepared for the environment to change as quickly as it actually is changing. And so as a result of that, the ancient traditions don't stand up in the way that we would like them to. And we have witnessed the death of their credibility. And so there's only one way to go now, and it's forward. So we have to do a new kind of spirituality, a spirituality that is resonant in our times, that doesn't presuppose the things that would have been obvious in 1600 or before, right? We are in this place where cultural mixing is and it's a foundational element to where we live. We're just not getting away from that anymore. The isolationism of feudal Japan is a bygone era. We're just not doing that thing anymore. And cultural mixing was always a thing, but now we live in a global economy where we can send messages to the other side of the earth instantaneously. And there's going to be a certain amount of mixing, and there's going to be people moving from here to there, and they're going to be doing it on airplanes and in ways that it's not going to be a caravan that you have to walk from from Egypt to Greece or something like that. And you got to cross a lake in order to do that, and it's going to be this like kind of harrowing journey, and the whole the longest way that you might make it would be like 600 miles or something like that, and that would be a huge distance to cover or something like that. Like we cover thousands of miles. You can cover an ocean in an instant if it's only a message, and in like 12 hours if it's a body, right? So we're in this moment where cultural mixing is part of the situation. It's here to stay. And so now that means that we need a new thing entirely. The old religions are not going to cut it anymore. And so what we need is a brand new thing that will likely be synthetic. So by synthetic, I don't mean false, fake, or artificial, although we can remember that the word artificial means like to effize, or like effi, or like to beautify, for example. It means to make into, right? So to beautify is to make into beauty. And so artificial is to artify, which is to make into art, right? So there's that. But I'm not, by synthetic, I don't mean fake. I mean synthesis, which is to take the two, at least two, or to take many, in this case, different traditions, and to turn them into one thing, to add them together until they make a one thing, which is not any of the old things. It is a new thing unto itself. And so we can think about synthesizers as making real music, right? So there's legitimate art and creativity that comes from synthesizers that don't make sounds that can be found in nature, right? And so that's where we are now. We are in the computerized moment where we are going to synthesize a new kind of sound, a new kind of harmony, a new kind of way of being in the world, which comes from the ancient traditions and is mixed with where we are in time now, and turns into a new kind of thing. That's what we're trying to do here in this course, and that's like sort of what I'm trying to do with my life. So we are facing an unprecedented future, and in order to do that, then we can take meaning from the traditions and move them into something new, which is real, which is meaningful to us, and which is sustainable, which is something that can stand the test of time. We won't know if it stands the test of time. We don't have the capacity to live long enough to see if something is going to survive 2,000 years, but we can create something that can sustain the test of time, that can stand the test of time, that like has the capability to do that, or has a fighting chance. That's all we can do. We can just create something that has a fighting chance, and then maybe it'll stand the test of time, and maybe it won't stand the test of time, and we'll never know. But what we can do is create something that is as robust as possible for, most importantly, for posterity, for the ones who are moving forward, and if you are a baby in 2025, then and you just come up in the era of deep fakes and all the rest of it, like, how do you, and the church doesn't mean anything to you, and there seems to be no spirituality outside of the marketplace, then like, how are you supposed to navigate the world? Well, what we're here to do is we are here to take what is old and rotten and decrepit and turn it into something new, a new kind of life form. So again, all truth is local here. And so that's part of what we are here to create, is the kind of spirituality which is flexible enough to suit any circumstance. And so it's not going to be universalizing. It's not going to have anything that is the one true way to live. And it's not going to try to convert anyone to the one true way to live, but rather is something that is inward looking. It's not about what other people are doing. It's about what I am doing for myself. and for my lineage, which comes before me and which comes beyond me. And this sense of like, I'm not trying to tell anybody else what to do, because telling other people what to do is the old way of doing things. And so there needs to be a kind of flexibility in the face of a global economy and all the rest of it that can suit whatever circumstances come up here. That's one of the primary problems that religion and spirituality needs to deal with and face in our time, is the absence of certainty that would have come with a localized economy and environment of yore, like that we evolved to understand, like the idea of like evolving as a hunter-gatherer, and there's like 200 people around or something like this, and that's all of everybody, and sometimes you engage with other tribes and stuff like this, but like for the most part, you're dealing with us. And those folks who you interact with occasionally are not that different, in that kind of environment, it makes sense that there can be like understandings that are kind of universal. But what we now live in is a globalized environment where that is not possible. That kind of universalized understanding is not possible. And so we've got to not take that as a foundational principle anymore, and instead understand that anything is possible in the world. And if anything is possible in the world, then what does that mean for us? How do we go about navigating that? And indeed, there are no answers. There are no answers. There are only questions. I talk about this all the time. So if you've been listening to the podcast or whatever, then you've heard me talk about no answers, only questions. I don't have the answer. I don't think that experts have the answer. I don't think that it is a good idea to find the answer, because answers are static. Instead, what we need are questions. We need to be able to proceed down a line of inquiry in an inquiring fashion that can give us new, good information, but that doesn't marry itself to being right. Because an answer wants to be right. A question wonders what would be right. We need to be humble before the data always. A certain sense of humility is important. So this is, there is no one right way to be, right? And that includes whatever way you are. That includes whatever way is reactive to corrupt churches and all the rest of that, right? Like, just because you have witnessed that the church is corrupt doesn't mean that you have found the right way to live. It just means that that might not be the move, right? And so what then could be the move? And so in order to work with what could be the move, then we are always going to be in need of shifting as new information comes in. As new and better information comes in, then the model with which we use to predict what happens in the world needs to change. So as new information comes in, we'll be like, oh, that is in conflict with the model as it stands right now. But it's not because the model is good and new information is bad. It's that the model needs to change to incorporate new information as it comes in. In the first place, it's important to remember that it is impossible to know all of the information. You can't have all of the information. This is just a basic foundational principle in the world that just simply is, and you just got to get with it. So, like, there is no way to know everything. And if it were possible to know everything, then you would still have to sort all of the information into stuff that's useful, stuff that's an obstacle, and stuff that's irrelevant. There's no way to have all of the information, because it's what happens is, so if we think about what is known as being like a spotlight, it's you can see the stuff in the spotlight, right? And so as what you know increases, then the size of that spotlight increases as well. But what happens is as the spotlight increases, so too does the shroud of darkness surrounding the spotlight increase in size in proportion to whatever is known. So there is no end to the amount of information that there is in the world. In the room that you're in, there's no end to the number of facts about things that there are in that room. There's no end to the amount of information that there is in the world. There's no end to the amount of information that there is in the solar system, in the galaxy, in the universe at large. There is no end to the amount of information that there is. So what you need to do is you need to be aware that your field of vision is just your field of vision. And not only is your field of vision just your field of vision, but you can only perceive like something like 6% of the electromagnetic radiation that is like light that is in the space that you're in. Your eyes can only catch like 6% of it. So there's 94% of light that you cannot witness with your eyes. So there's stuff going on that you can't see, and you just got to be aware of that, right? It is out there, and that is a field of unknown for you. And there's always going to be a wide majority of that which is unknown. And as such, as you can learn about what is unknown, then what is known does increase. However, there's always more that you don't know that could complicate your information. And so it's very important to understand that you don't know shit. And that includes me. I don't know shit either. And there is always a need to shift the predictive model as new and different and important and useful information comes in. As information comes in, we always update the model. The model does not become static, but rather is continuously growing and evolving in the same way that the world that we live in is continuously evolving and changing all the time. It is always one thing that's interesting to think about is signal versus noise. So there is a set of data, a set of information that comes in, right? And so in that set of information, there's going to be a bunch of information that is irrelevant. There's going to be a bunch of information that is an obstacle that's getting in the way of you understanding things. And there's going to be some small percentage of information, which is the stuff that you're actually looking for. And so what you're going to always be trying to do is sorting out all the other stuff that isn't signal. Signal is what you want, what is going to give you the signal is the information which is going to take you in the direction that you want to go. And so everything else is going to stop you from getting toward what you want to know. Now, that sorting process is based on what you want to know. So it's all about your objective. So if what you want, so imagine that you are on one side of the room and you want to walk to the other side of the room. Then there are going to be places where you can put your feet and you can walk to the other side of the room if there's a path there. But there's going to be stuff in the path. Maybe there's strewn toys or shoes or something like that, which are in your path. Those things are obstacles and can stop you from getting over to where you want to go. And so you need to be able to recognize that those things are obstacles. And then there's going to be a bunch of stuff like the fridge over there. That's just over there. It's just the fridge and it's just over there. And so you don't really need to think about the fridge. The fridge is irrelevant. So that is not a piece of the information that you need to pay attention to. But if you decide that you're hungry and you want to go check out what's in the fridge, then now the fridge has been elevated from that which is irrelevant to something that is useful. And so now the path from you to the fridge is the more important path and not the one that contains the toys that are strewn about the floor, right? And so you might not even see the toys on the floor if what you're focused on is the fridge. And so your objective always motivates your perception. And your objective determines what is signal and what is noise in the set of information that comes in, right? And so as you navigate in an information landscape, which is ultimately the way that we're going to approach religion and spirituality, then you're going to always need to remember that your objective is the thing that makes it so you can even perceive the world at all. As such, there's only this much information that's actually getting in, and it's a small amount. And so there's a lot of room for mistakes to get made in that space. And so what we need is to be humble before the data. There's too much data. We can't perceive all of this data. So because we know that we are always making cuts, that some stuff might get cut out as irrelevant when in fact it would be signal, right? And so this is an important concept which is always ongoing. We are always in the mood to update the predictive model so that we can improve the predictions that we can make in the world, and therefore the navigability of the world in general. So it's good to remember that the world is continuously evolving, right? There is a kind of, the model that I like to use of creation is flow. It is a flow model. It is continuously moving and evolving. Things are always changing in relationship to one another. And as a result, then they are, the things have to change in response to new inputs and such. So fuck around and find out is maybe the highest principle in the whole universe. Like, I feel like the universe is made of this question, like, what would happen if? And so it then goes about explaining in real time or finding out in real time what would happen if such and such a thing happens. And then that leads to a new set of circumstances when it's like, well, what would happen if? And then it continues, and it is simply ongoing. As a result of that style of being, which is not static, but rather continuously dynamic, then the way to approach it in kind is with the question and not the answer. The answer is a static principle. The answer knows what is right and has figured it out. The question has not figured it out and is therefore open to new ways of thinking about things and is open to updating the model all the time. So there are no answers, but only questions. A good line of inquiry will be extremely informative and will help you to understand what's going on, but does not marry itself to being right because it doesn't know if it's right already. Don't assume you know the answer. Rather, if you've got a good answer, ask yourself, what would flow from that if that were true? That allows you to make predictions about how the world is. And then as you test your predictions, then it lets you know if your model is good. So with this in mind here, let's think about what the universe am for a minute, because we need to think with a space of like what is being, and in order to orient and navigate our way through being. So I just spent a bunch of time talking about how the universe is too big to know. I like the Taoist principle that the Tao you can name is not the true Tao, right? And so it's too big. There's a mystery that is continuously larger, ever larger. No matter how zoomed out you get, you can't get to a point where you can see the whole universe. And so, but there is a sense that it is all governed by the same thing, by the same way, by the same shape. Like stuff is, there's an inherent unity to the cosmos, even though it is too big for any individual to understand. But it's worth noting, by the way, that this is a good thing. It's good that you can't perceive the whole thing. That would There would be no objective for you. And if you are listening to this, then you are in a human body, and it's going to be important for you to do human things and not Tao things. The Tao is whatever the Tao is, but you are somebody, and somebody is going to need to go to work sometimes, and is going to like need a home to live in, is going to drink water and breathe and these kinds of things, right? So you need to do the human things, and as such, it is important to not try to perceive the whole thing, but rather to get into, okay, so objective determines perception. That's not a problem. That simply is. That's the shape of things. And so how do we do a good job being a human in that space, right? That's the objective here. That's what we're trying to get done. How do I do a good job being me in the world, right? Now, there does seem to be a shape to things, and that's why I like Taoism a lot, and Taoism is probably going to come up a lot through this. Again, we are in a space where cultural appropriation is something that we need to be aware of. So again, part of the reason why I am so wed to the question and rather than the answer is a sense of like, okay, well, so I don't necessarily understand Taoism, especially not better than someone who was raised in that tradition or something like that, or someone who reads Chinese or something like this, right? Like those people have a better understanding of Taoism, right? And so I'm not trying to compete with that. I'm just, every time I engage with a Taoist principle, then I can be like, okay, well, what if that were true? What does that make me think? What does that make me feel? What would that mean to me? And what would flow from that, right? And I can improve my predictive model based on what comes up through that process of questioning and inquiry, right? So I like the Tao because it translates to the way. And so it's not the way in the sense of like the way, the truth, and the light, or what has been translated as the middle way in Buddhism. There's a certain sense of like a correct way to live, like a method that is the right thing, right? And so that is not what I think is meant by the translation "the way" of the Tao. The way is just the way that it is. Like things happen in the way that they happen, and that way is the Tao. It's the shape of things. Like stuff happens in the way that it happens, and that way seems to be the thing that governs all of the stuff. So I have talked about this in terms of shape before, and I think that shape is an excellent way to think about it. So if you think about shape, then shape seems to be at the root of the way that everything behaves in the world. And so this is true at the level that is sort of like intelligible and understandable for intuitive at the human scale, right? So we can think about like the ways that tools and screws are shaped in a certain kind of way, like the way that a screw fastens things better than a nail fastens things, because a nail is straight, right? And so a nail can just pull out, whereas a screw has these ridges and it screws in, it goes in this corkscrew pattern, and then that creates friction that makes it more difficult to just pull the screw out than it is difficult to pull a nail out, right? And so that is created by the shape of the screw in the first place. The tool is shaped in a particular kind of way that makes it behave in a way that is different from other ways of being in the world, right? And so shape matters at that level. And then we can think about like if there, so imagine that you're like that there's a coastline, and at the coastline, then there's ocean on one side, and then there's a mountain range, and then there's land on the other side of that, right? And so the mountains could be so high that weather that blows in off of the ocean can't get past the mountains. And so even though there's a whole body of water over here and there's rain that wants to come off the water, there can be a desert on the other side of the mountains just because the mountains are so tall that the clouds don't get over it. And so what we've got there is the shape of the land has determined the whole behavior of climate patterns, and then that goes on to describe the behavior because of the evolutionary niche that shows up in the desert over there. So the plants and the animals and the fungi behave in a certain way on either side of the mountain, and that is because of the shape of the land, right? This idea of shape matters at the geological level as well as at the level of humans and tools and screws and all the rest of that, right? We can go up further from there and see that there is a shape to the solar system and the cosmos, the space at large. And so that's what astrology is. And that is, I have already done a course on the foundations of astrology. It's called Astrology from the Ground Up. You can check that out at the website, ZamboniFunk.com. I think it's a good one, and it can help you to make predictions about the times that we're in, as well as your life or the life of your business or the life of your friends and family, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason that works is because of shape. So the sky is in a particular shape at a particular moment, and what flows from that moment is based on the shape of the container of that moment. So the way that I always think about that is like a pitcher. So if you've got a pitcher, right, and in that pitcher you've got water, then you can pour the water out of the pitcher, and because it's got the little lip on the end of it, then the water is gonna flow in a particular way based on the shape of the vessel, right? And then maybe you don't have a pitcher, maybe it's a pot, and so it's just got an edge around it, right? And so the water is going to flow differently out of that than it would flow out of a pitcher. Or maybe you've got something that has a jagged edge on it, and so then that is going to flow differently still from the way that the water flows out of either the pitcher or the pot. The shape of the vessel matters when you are pouring your substance out. When your flow comes from the vessel, then it comes from the vessel based on its shape. And so that is at least why I think I'm right, but I think the way that astrology works is that it sort of takes a snapshot of the shape of the vessel in that moment, and then what flows forth from that is characterized by the shape of the vessel. And so astrology is literally the shape of the sky in a particular moment, and then that can be used to do all sorts of fun stuff that astrology can do. We can also take this same concept of shape down a few sizes, and so down past the geological scale, down past the human scale, and get down to the molecular level. And so molecules are shaped in a particular kind of way, and because they are shaped in this way, then they have the interactions that they have out in the world. And so all of chemistry and biochemistry, all of life happens because molecules can be shaped in this or that way. This is the reason why enzymes work, right? So enzymes are proteins that are in a particular shape, and then they can find receptors that are in a particular shape that goes with that, and so they can sit in there, and that space is or that interaction between the enzyme and the receptor that can make a thing happen or that can stop a thing from happening. And so this is the reason why drugs work, and this is the reason why like the all of the reactions, all of the chemical reactions that happen in the world can happen because of the shape of things, because things are shaped at in a particular way, even at the subatomic level, where we're noticing that we've got protons, neutrons, and electrons in particular arrangements, and then they can bind or not bind to one another based on the arrangement of those subatomic particles. I don't know what comes beyond subatomic particles if we get smaller than that, but I'm going to guess that shape continues to matter even down at that scale. And if we were to get smaller than that, shape would still continue to matter at that scale as well. Shape, it seems to me to be the underlying thing that describes the way that things are. So shape and way to me are more or less synonyms. And so I think about, and so then we can also think about like a story has a particular shape, like the hero's journey, for example, where you've got your like hero character who's a nobody and doesn't matter in the world, and then he is like pulled out onto some journey that is difficult, and he's got to go and he's got to face a dragon, and it's real difficult, and then and in doing that he learns about himself and about the world at large, and then he comes back and he's strong and he's back at home and all that, right? Like the sort of like narrative arc that arc is a kind of shape, right? And so shape works not only at the physical level, but at the metaphorical level as well. And so shape is something that I will come back to again and again and again. And it is part of what I like about shape is that it is observable. And so there's something about the shape of things that creates the world that we live in. And so that can be further extrapolated to, well, what if I put myself into a certain shape, or what if I live a certain kind of shape? Then does that interact with the world around me? And the answer is yes, it does. And so then how does that work? What happens if I do that? And that is kind of more of that fuck around and find out, which is the highest principle in the universe. So part of what I'm noticing here is that the world is the way that it is, and that stuff like spirits or magic, or like the idea that astrology would work, it seems like kind of supernatural, right? It seems like something is going on that is not a part of the world. But in fact, that is how the world works. That is the way. And so magic and spirits and all of this stuff that might be thought of as supernatural is not supernatural. It is in universe. It is part of the cosmos. It is supernatural. It is natural. It's the nature of things. It's the way. It is how we live in the world. If we can sort of like, especially if we are in this mindset of like, I don't know what's true. I know for a fact that I don't know what's true, right? Then, there have been years and years of people saying that there are spirits in the plants, or spirits in rivers, or these kinds of things. And so then we come to the post-enlightenment age, and it's like, well, that's cute, but there are no spirits in there. And then it's like, well, do you know that? Do you know that there's no spirit in there? Like, if you can only perceive like 6% of the light, then what else might be happening here? There's 94% of stuff that is going on that do you know? What do you know? And so like, there's a certain sense of like, if you can be humble before the data that you can't perceive all of, and that you can't sort in the proper order, then you can have a certain amount of humility around what might be true in the world. And there's a certain sense of like, okay, well, so people have been saying this for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Like, maybe there's something to it, right? Maybe there's something going on. Maybe there is a kind of rule structure that follows the shape that would allow for the existence of a spirit entity or something like this, right? And so it, and that the way that spirits exist must also be in constant flux, the way that the world is in constant flux. Octavia Butler said that God is change, and I have not been able to disprove that. Something about the way of change is like the creation event is ongoing. It's something that like, so like this moment creates the next moment, creates the next moment all the time. And so the way that we interact in this moment literally creates the next moment all the time. And so that means that I, as an individual, am a kind of God form because I engage in the creation of the next moment, right? Each one of us has this capacity to create the next moment. And so then there's all sorts of downstream stuff there when it comes to like thinking about free will and fate and all the rest of that. And we don't need to get into that right now, but those are fun rabbit holes to get into because like what is possible if this is all true, right? What is possible? That is the real question that we're getting to here. No questions, only answers. So when dealing with a kind of fresh spirituality, then we've got to deal with the idea of morality and ethics. So so part of the reason why I went so hard at the beginning of like, listen, I'm not a moral authority here is because and that's part of like the like no answers. I don't have the answers. I only have questions. I don't have answers. And it's because I don't want to tell you what is right and wrong. I am not the arbiter of what is right and wrong or of what is good and evil. I am not the one who makes that decision. In fact, I am delighted that I am not the one who makes that decision. I don't have to know what good and evil are. I just have to know that there is stuff in the world and that I can create the next moment. If I can get that going, then I can come back to good and evil and we can think about it in at scale. So, so the traditional religions that we are sort of coming out of use morality as a behavior control device. And that's part of the reason why I'm like, listen, I'm not a moral authority here because I'm not trying to control anyone else's behavior. I have a hard enough time controlling my own damn behavior. Watch me scrolling on Instagram mindlessly for no damn reason when I should be going to bed. And you will see that I have trouble controlling even my own behavior. I don't want to control your behavior. I don't want to control anybody else's behavior, but my own. So that does leave the question of what are good and evil? What are these things, And so one of the things that I learned when I started drinking ayahuasca on a really regular basis, or not on a regular basis, but I drink a high quantity of ayahuasca for a period of time. And so I learned a few things in doing that. One was that magic was a real thing, that the world was not as had been described by society, culture, and my schools. That the world consisted of more things, and so it opened my mind to the possibility of other things, and that was what. And I was already open to that because I was interested in questions. I've always been interested in questions, but so as I came to interface with other ways of with spirits, and like I had some spirit contact, and I started engaging with other ways of thinking about things other than the sort of like rigid answer based ways that I had been taught in schools and this kind of thing, and churches and the rest. Like that really opened my mind. But then as I got into the wider landscape of possibility, then I realized that good and evil, like truth, are always local. And so like what is good to me might be evil to another, and what is evil to me might be good to another. And this is immediately understandable if you think about like watching a documentary, and you're watching a documentary about bears, and they go to the river and they're scooping up the salmon and just chomping them salmon and just getting down. Then we love to see it because we're from the perspective of the bear. We're like, oh yes, we love to see that she's getting enough food and she's going to hibernate and it's going to be great, and she's going to pass it down to the cubs and the cubs are going to survive. And, love to see it. We can see that same event from the perspective of the salmon and be like, what a terror this bear is. We're trying to swim, and then like so many salmon lose their lives as a result of this bear, which is just running amok out here, just eating all. How many salmon can this bear fucking annihilate, right? It becomes a problem. Like, so that these two are opposed on the idea of good and evil in that moment, right? And so that's just like an easy one to go to. And this is going to always be true, always in the world. There are going to be differences of opinion when it comes to the ideas of good and evil. What's good for me might not be good for everyone in the world, right? Or for like, we can get to the completely nihilistic place where let's zoom out and look at not just the solar system, but the galaxy in which the solar system is nestled, right? So from that vantage point, where we've got several different star systems, we've got many different star systems, and we've got millions of planets and all the rest of that, then if there's a nuclear war on the Earth, it doesn't matter in the slightest. It doesn't matter at all. Like nothing matters at that, like nothing earthly matters at that scale, right? It simply doesn't matter. And I would venture to guess that if you zoom in far enough to where your time horizons are short enough, then you also get to a place where stuff doesn't matter. So like if we look at the concept of time that a mayfly has, right? A mayfly lives for 24 hours. So a mayfly doesn't even have a proper concept of day and night because you only get one of each, right? So it's just one line. It's not a cycle. It's just linear time for that period of time, right? And so then again, nuclear war, like between the United States and Russia, for example, or China or Iran or whatever, like shit just doesn't matter. Literally doesn't matter to a mayfly because like it doesn't, like that time horizon just doesn't reach that capacity, right? And so, but that is not to say that the mayfly or at the galaxy level, there are not judgments of or values of good and evil, right? Things that are good for that environment or things that are bad for that environment. It just means that the scale matters. So what matters to a mayfly doesn't matter on Alpha Centauri and vice versa, right? Alpha Centauri is a planet, I think. Is it a planet or is it a star? I don't remember it. Doesn't matter. I fucking live on the Earth. Doesn't matter at all, right? So in this kind of landscape, then it can be difficult to understand what good and evil are. And so the way that I go about understanding those things is, does this action produce outcomes that you like or that you don't like? And this is the way that I think is best for evaluating morals and ethics, at least for me, in the scale of my life, this is what I have found useful, right? So, does a thing produce outcomes that I like or that I don't like? And across what time horizon, you know? So like this is, I talk about this all the time when I talk about malefics versus benefics in astrology, right? So malefics are the planets Saturn and Mars that bring discomfort and problems and challenges and obstacles and difficulties and conflicts and tensions and inflammation and all of this kind of stuff, right? They bring trouble. Benefics are the ones, Venus and Saturn, that tend to bring joy and harmony and cooperation and stability and moderation and all that sort of stuff, right? So they tend to bring outcomes that you like, right? But there's a certain question of comfort, right? So malefics bring discomfort, benefics bring comfort. So how comfortable is the right amount of comfortable, right? So if all I do is chill on the couch and eat sweets, then how good a life is that? How good is that for my life? And how good a life is that for everyone who I interact with? Versus the kind of life where I get up off my ass and I do hard things and I engage in challenges and sometimes have conflicts and have to sweat things out and stuff like that. Which of these is the better life, right? And so there's a question about that, right? So if it's all work and challenge and difficulty, then maybe that's not the best life either, right? And so there's a question here around, am I getting outcomes that I like versus outcomes that I don't like, and across what time horizon, right? So if all I do is chill on the couch, then that's going to be comfortable in the short term, but long term, perhaps not as good. If I challenge myself, then that's uncomfortable in the short term, but perhaps in the long term turns out good for me and those around me, or something like this, right? There are many ways that we can sort of evaluate each individual thing. And so it's good to know, am I producing outcomes that I like, and across what time horizon? And then there's a question of which relatives, how many relatives are affected and how are they affected, right? So by relatives, I mean, so time is a measurement of the relationship between objects in space. We will talk more about that probably in the next one, where we'll talk about like ontology and things. What does it mean to be? But what I'm getting at here is that we are all related to one another. Like relationships between objects in space is the way that time functions, and the relationships that we have to each other and the relationships that we have to plants and animals and fungi and air and mountains and streams and geology and all the rest of that. We are embedded in the world. The world could be thought of as a one thing. And so we are all related to one another, right? And so that's what I mean by relatives. And so which relatives are affected by my actions, how many relatives are affected, and in what ways. So are my actions harmful to relatives, to which relatives, and how often and why? And then which relatives, how many relatives are harmed or helped or whatever else by what I'm doing? And like what kind of effect are my actions having on relatives in the world? You know, these are not easy calculations. These are not things that are easy to understand, even let alone like make a strong pronouncement about. Like arriving at an answer is a difficult thing here, right? No answers, only questions. And so these are the kinds of questions that we can inquire about in order to bring ourselves closer to a kind of morality that is real and meaningful and sustainable in the world that we're living in, and the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible that we are trying to create. In general, I think your heart knows when you're doing good and when you're doing evil. And so having a kind of inquiry into one's own self, I think matters a lot here as well. So this brings us to an important concept that I did not develop. This came from the evolutionary biologists Brett Weinstein and Heather Heying in their book, The Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century. They described, they also were the ones who described the concept of hypernovelty, as I described it earlier. And part of the way that they go about thinking with, especially like traditional religions and such, is with a concept called literally false but metaphorically true. And so the so what we notice in the world is that the observed evolutionary directive is to lodge as much of yourself as far into the future as possible, right? And so this is the idea of like getting your genes into the future and like getting your also your cultural customs and whatever else, like get yourself into the future seems to be the evolutionary directive. That seems to be the prime directive that is witnessed in the world. I don't know why this is true, but I know that this is observably true, right? And so the question why is maybe something worth doing as we explore a spirituality that would make sense in our times. But I certainly don't have the answer to that because I have no answers, only questions. So, so this is what we are here to do. And because humans evolve culture as the primary means of getting our genes into the future, because that is our evolutionary niche, then a belief or cultural custom that achieves this directive is preserved in culture that persists across time. And so that is necessarily going to include and be part and parcel to religion and spirituality. These customs often get to this achievement of the evolutionary directive with beliefs that misunderstand how things work at the literal level, but they work anyway to get to lodge genes and selves into the future as far as possible. And so this is how like legends and myths and parables come to such prominence in religious thought. It's not necessarily, so you can think that like the world was created in 7 days, for example, right? And you can think that to be a literal truth, but there might be something that is metaphorically true about the way that that is structured that could be useful in getting ourselves into the future as far as possible. Or, so the example that Brett and Heather use all the time is the idea that everything happens for a reason, right? And so everything happens for a reason is something that you say to someone when when that person has experienced a kind of tragedy that feels arbitrary and horrific, and that can close you off to opportunities because of grief and depression, right? And so if something terrible happens, something like your child is killed, or you're maimed in some kind of way, or you are robbed, or some other tragedy happens, right? Then you can grieve about that, and you can be in a place where you sort of like close yourself off because of the pain that you endure. And so in doing that, then you can stop yourself from seeing opportunities that exist for you because you are so wrapped up in your pain. And so a way to get around that, or a way to talk about that, is everything happens for a reason. And so even though it is not true that everything happens for a reason, so goes the explanation by Brett Weinstein and Heather Hine. Even though there is no reason why things happen in this kind of random or arbitrary way that simply does not have a rhyme or reason to it, and that it's not useful. It's not God's will that your child be killed early or something like this. That is not literally true. But if you can think with the idea that everything happens for a reason, then that can open up your mind to possibilities that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. And perhaps there are opportunities available to you now that you didn't have before tragedy struck. And so because you can see and take advantage of those opportunities, then it is useful to think that everything happens for a reason, even though it is literally untrue. So that's the idea that something can be literally false, but metaphorically true. It's better for you to think that way than for you to think with the literal truth. And as such, you go with the metaphorical truth anyway. Now, in this case, with everything happens for a reason, then I would caution that Brett Weinstein and Heather Hine seem to have the answer, which is that everything does not happen for a reason, the end. So they know that to be true. That's the answer for them. Because I don't have answers and only questions, I would ask the question, do you know that? Is it possible that there could be a God who has a will, or that there could be spirit entities who are, at work and trying to get you to see things? Like, I don't know that that is not the case. And so it's possible that there is a literal truth to everything happens for a reason. I don't know one way or the other. And what I always think with my idea that there are no answers, only questions, is it is worth inquiring into at least both of these ways of thinking about things and seeing which one yields the best informational fruit, and then working with that one. So it's possible that you will decide that there is no God who has a will or whatever else, and that's fine if that's what you come to. It should just be an open question, because the idea that there is no God is difficult to prove. And so because you can't prove that, then maybe the possibility that there's a God should remain on the table, right? So there are lots of these literally false but metaphorically true ways of understanding things that show up in traditional religions. And so this is part of the way that we arrive at traditional moralities and such, is the sense that God's going to be angry at you if you don't treat your neighbor as yourself or something like that, right? And so maybe we now, in this moment where we have a theory of evolution and natural selection, and where we are technologically advanced in such a way that the existence of a God who would be finger waggy at you doesn't really make sense anymore. Maybe we don't have to use that finger wagging God as a way to notice that if you treat your neighbor as well as you treat yourself, or even better, then that produces long-term outcomes which are beneficial to you and neighbor and all the other relatives. So this improves our chances of lodging ourselves into the future and achieving the primary evolutionary directive better than if we don't observe or behave accordingly, right? So if we don't behave as if treating your neighbor is better than yourself is a good thing to do, then we achieve worse outcomes, right? And there's going to be a lot of these that, as we navigate traditional religious texts or traditional religious ways of thinking in the world, that it's going to be worth thinking with, okay, so is it possible that there is a kind of literal falsehood here that could still be metaphorically true in a way that could be useful to me? Furthermore, what might be literally false but metaphorically true even now? What is a belief that I might hold that could be literally false but metaphorically true? What is difficult to prove literally that would make my life better even though it is difficult to prove literally? There's also a question around where might I already be using incomplete information to make decisions that might not be optimal or that might even be harmful. One of the ways that I like to think about this, an example that I like here is the idea of germ theory, right? So the idea of germ theory is that there are microorganisms which are too small to see with the naked eye that live around in the world everywhere, and that can be on your hands and in your mouth and inside your body and all of this kind of thing, and that they can sometimes be pathogenic. And so if a pathogen gets inside your body, then that pathogen will make you sick, right? And so this was a really big idea that came on the medical scene at a certain point. And so then doctors started washing their hands in between patients, and they started getting better outcomes, right? And so on understanding that microbiology is a real thing, then they could improve outcomes by washing their hands. However, there can come a point where you start to think that micropathogens are the only way that diseases can come into being. And so you can go overboard on thinking that germs are the only thing that cause pathogens, when in fact you might be exposed to toxicity, right? So lead, for example, is not considered a microbiologic pathogen, but if you eat it, it'll harm you, right? Like these kinds of things, that kind of toxicity is a thing. Germ theory is often also opposed against terrain theory. And so terrain theory is the idea that a healthy body maintains health better than a sickly one does. And so the idea is terrain, like the body itself, the terrain that the pathogen or the toxicity finds itself in. A healthy one will be better at maintaining health than a sickly one, which will have a more difficult time maintaining health. So in the event that a pathogen comes into contact with a sickly terrain, then it'll be more likely to do damage, to cause illness, all the rest of that, right? And so there's a certain amount of like, how much of each one of these are we going to pay attention to? Is it important to be sanitary and kill all of the pathogens? Or is it more important to create a healthy terrain in the first place so that pathogens or toxic chemicals or environmental other like electromagnetic frequencies or anything else that you could imagine, maybe we imagine that spirits are coming in as well, like all of that sort of stuff. If that stuff comes into contact with the terrain, then maybe there's something to the idea of being healthier or being sicklier in the first place, right? And so there's a kind of spectrum here that like is worth interrogating. What kinds of beliefs do I already hold? And is it possible that some of those could be literally false, but metaphorically true? And if so, how much? These are good questions to ask. These are good questions to think with. So ultimately, I think that the goal of a spirituality in our time is to create harmony. So this is to say that I am, well, so sing with harmony for a second. So harmony is the notion that all things are in their proper place along the landscape of time and space. So in space, so thinking about the arrangement of shapes, and in time, that arrangement of shapes and their changing relationships over a period of time. There is a way to be in that that is harmonious, that is everything in its proper place. And proper is sort of like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Proper is in the eye of the beholder. But if you have eyes to behold, then part of your job is to behold and notice what is beautiful and what is harmonious, and perhaps move toward creating that kind of harmony, right? So because I am, and each of us is, part of the universal God form, right? The creation event is ongoing, and each of us can make decisions as to how to create the next moment based on the moment that we are currently in. Because of that, my life shape interacts with all the others. And in any given moment, I can choose to create more harmony or more discord than where I am currently, right? So I have the choice to move in between those places, right? And so if I can move toward a situation where all things are in their proper place, where we are all singing together and it sounds good, then I have the capacity to improve not just my own health, but the health of the world around me, the health of my relatives. And so, so again, this is like keyed into the scope that matters for a human life, right? So where I am, so I'm not trying to like make changes that are gonna, I'm not trying to live my life in a way that is going to matter on Alpha Centauri, because it's simply not going to happen, right? I am trying to make decisions that shape the flow of time, that shape the relationships between me and relatives, that move toward harmony, toward things being in their proper place, toward a kind of thriving that is not just my thriving, but all of as many relations as I can incorporate in that. Some folks think that the purpose of a human is to create a garden, and to things would live without that kind of like intentional input, but we can optimize thriving by making intentional decisions as to where stuff can grow, and you can make water ponds for the animals of the area and this kind of thing, because that can increase all of the thriving. So I can make decisions to create spaces that will increase the thriving of the entire community. And so that I see as my job, to better harmonize with the living world. And that's what this program is. That's what the point of this course is to give us some questions to think with, and some ways of being in the world through conceptualization and practice that can better harmonize with the living world in which we find ourselves. So thank you so much for being here and being a part of this journey. And I look forward to seeing where we end up going with all of this. So I'm just going to leave you with an exercise here. So if we remember that the creation event is ongoing, and that each of us participates in the ongoing life form with every breath, then, and that's important to remember, right? Like, so the things that I breathe out, the like carbon dioxide that I breathe out is breathed in by plants. And plants take carbon dioxide in, they inspire carbon dioxide, and they expire oxygen, right? And so what they breathe out, I breathe in. What I breathe out, they breathe in, right? And so there's a continuous and ongoing dynamic between all the animal life and all the plant life, for example. And it is much more complicated than that, and much more elegant and beautiful than that is. And so, but in every breath, we participate in the ongoing life that is not just ourselves, but the community at large. And so breath is a good place for us to begin to take time to resonate with and harmonize with the living world that is around us. So I made a while ago a breath exercise, which is it is like, I didn't make up this breath exercise, which is to hyperventilate and then stop breathing at the bottom. And so like you're, and then after your exhale, you just hang out and stay without breathing for a long period of time, and then take a little recovery breath, and then do it again. Like, I didn't make that up. I didn't make that program up. It's a long-standing program, and I learned it from Wim Hof. I like Wim Hof breathing a lot. I just didn't like the music that was on his video on YouTube. The music didn't feel beautiful enough to me, and the music didn't follow the rhythm of the breath at all. And so I made the same exercise, but I made it into a more beautiful musical event. And so and that's available on YouTube. It's also available on Spotify, Tidal, Pandora, Apple Music, wherever you get your music at. So if you've got like a subscription there or something like that, then that'll be maybe easier to pull up and do. I recommend doing this exercise kind of like as much as possible, one time a day for a week or something like that. One time a day for like life, it was probably a good thing to do, and it doesn't have to be my program. You can do the Wim Hof one. You can do it on your own, whatever. But so like the video on YouTube is probably going to be broken up by ads or something like that if you don't have an ad blocker in place or whatever, if you don't have the subscription in place and all of that. So, and that can be really disruptive to a breath exercise. And so that's why I suggest using one of the music apps or whatever, if you have that, if that's what you're doing. I'm also going to attach that video to the end of this video. And so, so you can follow along there. There are many ways to do it. It is available all throughout the internet. I'm sure you can figure something out, but yeah, so what you're going to do with this exercise is simply breathe along with the music, and enjoy the music and the harmony and the feeling that arises from music. Music is itself healing, and breath is itself healing. And just contemplate the idea that my world is alive and that I am a part of the living world. Just be with that while you participate in this breath exercise. And as you go about doing that, then I have complete faith that ideas, insight, inspiration will come to you, and you will be better for it having done that. So thank you so much for being here throughout this pretty long lecture at this point. I super appreciate all of y'all, and please enjoy. Breathe. Peace and blessings, beautiful people. Take a moment to get comfortable, lie down, sit down, however you like. And we're gonna take some slow breaths to begin. There's no rush. Breathe in. Out. out. Twice as fast this time. In, out. In, out. In, out. In. Now twice as fast as that. Here we go. Come on. In, out. In, out. Feel the pulse. Feel the flow. In, out. Doing great. Come on. In, out. Last phrase. Around here we go. And in, out. Take a big breath in and let it go. Hold. Enjoy this piece. If you need to take a breath, feel free to do so. To breathe, just breathe. And let it go. Get ready to get back into that rhythm. Here we go. In, out. In, we go. And in, out. Out. In, out. And take a big breath in and let it go. Hold. I am a divine and healing entity imbued with the power of the Creator. There's no competition. If you need to breathe, just breathe. To heal is my most natural state of being. It is glorious. And time for a big recovery breath. 3, 2, 1. In, out, in, and hold. And let it go. Get ready to get back into that rhythm. Here we go. In, out, in, out. Doing great. Come on. In, out. Last phrase. Around here we go. And in, out.
world. I'll do everything for it, and nothing I can do, nothing will ever befall me that will separate me from this living world. It's my larger body. It can pour its intelligence and its bliss through me.